Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today we're going to do part 4, Soho, of New York Stories. So New York Stories about Soho. This is going to be part 4. I'm going to finish it up right now. And up till now, I've sort of been explaining the whole process of what happened down in Soho, how I went to this party in 1969 when Soho had just become this vacant, empty vacuum. For 10 years, people thought they were going to put this throughway across lower Manhattan. They called it the Lomax. Let me run right over the map here for a quick second. Now, I was using this earlier, so I've got some writing on it, so I apologize for that. But Soho is down here in lower Manhattan. Here's Manhattan, Central Park, 42nd Street, 14th Street, Greenwich Village, and here's Houston Street. So Soho was between Houston and Canal Street, over here in this area that I sort of blackened off. And it was this industrial area right next to the Lower East Side, Little Italy, Chinatown. That was also on the edges of it, and then Wall Street is below it. Wall Street is below it. Theater District is up here. So what would happen is, for 10 years, Robert Moses was planning on connecting the interstate highway systems. And to connect the interstate highway system, he had to go through Manhattan. So he wanted to go, and let's go back here. We'll go back to this. I finished that off. We need to connect the Holland Tunnel with the Brooklyn bridges and the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. So he was going to plow his way through with a 10-lane throughway, right across here, make a connection to here, a connection to there, so that you get come out of the Holland Tunnel, you wouldn't have to get down on the city street. You get on a 10-lane superhighway and go across Manhattan. And over here, there's an article that was in The Woman Who Saved New York City from Superhighway Hell. And this was a Vanity Fair article from, I think, 2017 about Jane Jacobs. So as I said about Jane, Jane was a journalist, an urban studies specialized in. She did political economy, economics, and overall she was a philosopher too. She didn't have the college degree, but she had quite a bit of insight, and she was also very much attracted to poetry, so she's a really good writer. And her writing is absolutely clean and lucid, and it's easy to read, and it's not like picking up a graduate school thesis kind of paper, which I did once at the New School, which took me. I had to literally diagram the sentence to figure out what they were talking about, and you wind up with that with a lot of overly educated thinkers thinking. Well, Jane Jacobs wasn't overly educated, but she was sure pretty smart. And originally she did this amazing story about housing in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and that she went against the establishment big time. Architectural Digest then hired her, and she lived in Greenwich Village and rode a bicycle to work. And she was put down by most of the people at Architectural Digest because she didn't have the architectural degree, and she wasn't embedded with the thinking that was au courant at the time. The fancy Corbusier buildings and leveling areas and knocking down slums, and she's the one who stopped them running Fifth Avenue right through Greenwich Village, right through Washington Square Park. Robert Moses wanted to run Fifth Avenue right through Washington Square Park back in the 50s. She stopped that. And then in the 60s, she literally spent 10 years fighting this project to put this lower Manhattan Expressway, Lomax, across this neighborhood. She knew it would completely destroy the neighborhood. Not only would it destroy the neighborhood, it would also destroy, let me go back to the other map here, the symbiotic relationship that's going on in the city. You had these craft people down here and builders down here and little factories and all sorts of stuff. Like 500 buildings down here. And they're all filled with people that are making things. People that make things, they're called essential workers or slaves, depending on how much you're paying them. Well, the theater district is completely dependent on them for manufacturing and making things and fixing things. All over the city. So in the middle of the city, you've got your publishing houses and your network buildings and your corporate headquarters all around the place. But people need these other types of activities. And it's a symbiotic relationship between all of these things that creates wealth. It's the symbiotic relationship between one business and another business and another that creates wealth, which is why Jane Roberts, the book I used to give away a lot, was called Cities and the Wealth of Nations. Now, the book that preceded this was The Life and Death of the Great American City. And that was her original masterpiece. This one I found more to my liking. And it's the antithesis, Cities and the Wealth of Nations, it's the antithesis of Adam Smith's An Inquiry into the Nature and Cause of the Wealth of Nations. So Adam Smith is basically attributing wealth to the nation state, and Jane Roberts is attributing the wealth to the city. It's the city that's generating the wealth. And she's absolutely right. And you can see it. And the creativity, the creative forces in the city, I would argue, are the main driving force behind that creation of wealth. The theater district in Manhattan, the plays that are going on, the symphonies that are going on. This is what makes the city alive. People don't want to be there because Wall Street is there. They want to be there because the theaters are there. They leave their penthouse apartments and get into their little limousines, and they go downtown and have dinner and go to a play, or have dinner and go to a show. It's all about the culture. The money happens to be there, and it's a complement to the theaters. The cities that are the most vibrant are the theater, are cities that are loaded with cultural events. Chicago, San Francisco. LA gets to be a bit enigmatic in my mind because of the long streets. It's sort of like a little bit like Las Vegas, they remind me. Walking a block in parts of Los Angeles can be like taking a hike. So in this book, Cities and the Wealth of Nations, the big thing that Jane talks about is the Sidewalk Ballet that takes place in the city. The Sidewalk Ballet. So she's living, say, on the second floor, and there's all this retail on the first floor. And she needs to leave for the day, and she's got a package coming from some delivery service, and she's got a kid to take care of. Well, she goes down and she puts a note on the door that her keys are going to be at the butcher shop, and she drops the keys off with the butcher. And then the kid is going to be watched by one of the neighbors who's watching her other kids on the block. And there's sort of a familial kind of relationship going on right there in the street. There's eyes on the street, and it's making a sidewalk ballet. And this whole concept of sidewalk ballet, she's been written about this quite a bit. She translated this into the farmer's market. Jane Roberts is one of the people who's major figure responsible for the farmers markets in the country today. There was a small number, something like maybe 1,000 farmers markets at one point, and after her involvement with this, there were like 3 times as many farmers markets. She recognized the import of having a farmers market where local farmers brought their vegetables in, and you went to this and picked them out, because it also created another neighborhood environment, similar to the kind of thing you have in France, in Paris, all over parts of Europe. So rather than bulldozing the neighborhood and putting up a 10-story, a 10-lane freeway, which happened in Oakland, and is one of the reasons why Oakland is such a mess today, she worked to really save the life of these cities. And along the way, sometimes things can turn to their opposite. And she recognized this. And Soho would be the absolute perfect example of this, because at a certain point, so first the artistry and then the businesses come along. Well, once the galleries came in, the galleries were starting to be the nail in the coffin, because they were a little bit too much for the neighborhood. There was too much money coming down to go to the galleries to get the stuff. So Bloomingdale's, Tiffany's, Louis Vuitton, all of these upscale, uptown businesses started to bring little annexes down to Soho. By 1990s, they were loaded with all of these other kinds of businesses. After after the Twin Towers in 9/11, after the Twin Towers, there was an emergency, there was a rebuilding fund in New York to help the neighborhoods that were affected by the Twin Towers. So let's go to the map real quick. Well, the Twin Towers would have been down here on Wall Street, over here on the side, the west side over here. Yeah, around here. Over here. And Soho's right here, not far away. Hello? Severely affected by what happened over here. Well, Bloomingdale's has a satellite in Soho. Who's getting the lion's share of the money at the end of the day? Bloomingdale's. Just like the PPP loans that we've been reading about in the papers for the last month or so. Where'd the lion's share of the money go? To the small businesses? I don't think so. They didn't. So we're in the neighborhood now. The neighborhood is getting more and more gentrified to the point where it's today. And this is, I was going to end with this, but I'm going to end by talking about a few more Jane Jacobs books briefly. But I'm going to end the Soho section totally. Let me put this other picture up. This was stunning. This was in the newspaper today, and this here is, okay, the headline at the top of this is Diesel lands in Soho. This is Art Week in Manhattan. This is Art Week in Manhattan. And the Fashion Week in Manhattan. Excuse me, not Art Week. Fashion Week. The fashion shows have started. And there's a half a dozen shows going on. At the bottom of this page here that I just showed you, the little headline there says, Diesel lands in Soho. Diesel is on the upswing. The Italian brand, best known for its denim, opened a flagship store in Soho in a bid to recapture the 1990s glory days. Now is the moment, said Eduardo, the head of the company. It's about freedom and the values of America. We want to be back. We want to be back into the future. We want to be back into the future. Now, the gal up there on the top of the photo is wearing I believe she has a jacket on with nothing on underneath, and her leggings, she liked the leggings because they show her booty. They like the leggings, so they show her booty. So, Jane Jacobs' initial efforts to stop this expressway allowed the artists to come into the lofts, allowed the neighborhood to grow and grow and grow, and then it reached a tipping point. And Jane, in her writings, warned about this possibility happening. And in fact, at this tipping point, the opposite starts to occur in the neighborhood. So it loses its neighborhood sort of feel and becomes overshadowed by the moneyed interest. So I'm sure Jane would probably roll over in her grave right now. She died in 2006. If she saw the Diesel fashion show with this building completely converted and modernized into this bright red with a bright red a walkway coming down and another room underneath it. And this whole place completely built out into this very expensive gallery type place that's really cool for really chic parties going on. So I think Jane would be dismayed, to say the least, about this. So there's a balance that needs to be made, and I'll just go to Jane Jacobs now. I'll just finish up with Jane Jacobs. So let me put the picture of her up there. Let's get the picture up, and there it is on the full screen. It's a really sweet picture of Jane. I really like that picture. It's the Middle Ages of Jane. She's not too old, not too young there, and she looks very cool. I like that picture of her. The book, I got 3 or 4 books here. The Nature of Economics. This was a really interesting book. The Nature of Economics, and what this is about, it's about connecting economics and nature. It's about connecting economics and nature. Basically, she talks about biomimicry and biomass and recycling and microchips, and she also talks about, at one point, she got a little story in here about how the redwoods in Northern California are harvesting the fog for their ecological benefit. She gets very granular in her stories, and she'll interview somebody from 20 years ago, and get very granular into the little minutiae about their stories, then make the larger the leap to a larger principle about them. So this book is really, and what it is, it's a dialogue between four people that get together in an apartment. I think it's 4 or 5 people. They get together in an apartment in Chelsea, in Manhattan, and I think in Hoboken too. It takes place in 2 different cities. And they're talking about the nature of economics, and they're talking about the connectivity, the symbiotic relationship between nature and economics, and how you need to study nature. If you study nature, you can apply those principles to economic principles. She's saying that the cities, industries, and nations grow, sustain themselves, and either fail or die the same as an embryo does, or a forest does, or a river, or a delta. The same principles will apply to cities that apply to nature. And this is, I think, groundbreaking kind of thinking. So any of you environmentalists out there that have a hankering, it's a really interesting dialogue, Nature of Economics. Another book right in back of me, Vital Little Plans. Vital Little Plans. This is a whole book of essays that go back to her early writing, very early writing. And one of the really gems in here is called Downtown. Downtown is for People. Downtown is for People. It's a real, she has an essay in here on civil disobedience. She has an essay in here about the end of the plantation era. So this woman's thinking is quite broad, quite encompassing. And if you want to not dig into the over voluminous city, the life and death of a great American city, this would be a good primer for a lot of her thinking. And the last one we're going to look at is a real uplifting title, Dark Ages Ahead. Dark Ages Ahead. Now this was the last thing she wrote in her 80s. And commented, the liveliness of her mind is a joy to behold. The woman's writing is absolutely stunning. It's really a pleasure reading this woman. She talks about the culture being unsalvageable if stabilizing forces themselves become ruined and irrelevant. Well, if you watch the news night after night, you'll notice that the stabilizing forces, which one of them was journalism for the longest time. The libel suit by Sarah Palin was thrown out just the other day, but it'll probably get challenged again. And the whole journalism field is open for, they're taking pot shots at that every day. And Fox News is called a news station, and it's nothing more than destructive fascist propaganda. So we have institutions right now that are in severe shape. We all watch this insurrection against this government take place, and as a result of it, none of the responsible people that caused it to happen are yet in jail. A few of the underlings are. Dark Ages Ahead. A couple of things she gets into in the book are is taxing policies that are starving the cities. And the right wing for the last 8 years have been doing this all around the country in these Republican states. They've been literally taking tax dollars and taking them away from the coffers of the local municipalities. Lack of policing in the financial sector, and bad science that leads to bad theories which cloud reality. And you could look at the whole farming industry and how the pesticides have proliferated, which are poisoning the streams, and how the GMOs have become part of the daily diet in every soda you drink out there. Well, that's enough of that. We went enough with Jane Jacobs. I think I got it. If not, let me know. Peace, patience, persistence, and I'll try to stay on topic for Soho or whatever it is I do the next New York story on next time. Peace, patience, persistence, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining.